Let's get started. Good morning. I'd like to begin by welcoming all of you to the joint informational hearing of the Assembly Committee on Housing and Community Development and the Senate Transportation and Housing Committee. The purpose of today's hearing is to provide members of the committees and the public with an overview of our state's housing resources and programs. These resources are extremely important as we continue to face a critical shortage of affordable housing. You may agree with me that California is becoming less and less affordable to its residents, including the middle-class families. I'd like to share some statistics with you. The home ownership rate in our state has reached a record low of 54%. About 45% of all California households are renters, and that translates to 5.6 million households. Nearly 8 in 10 extremely low-income families and well over 1/3 of very low-income families are severely burdened by housing costs. They spend more than half of their income on housing costs. High housing costs and sometimes result in dire consequences, as we know. As of January 2014, 20% of our nation's homeless populations were in California. California has the largest number of unaccompanied homeless children and youth, and that is 13,709 individuals, or 30% of the nation's total. I look forward to hearing from our panelists today about, one, what resources we have available to us at the state level to address these challenges, and two, how can we make the limited resources work better for us, and finally, three, what additional tools we need to address our severe affordable housing shortage. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to my co-chair, Senator Jim Bell, for some opening remarks.
Yes, welcome. There we go. Can you hear me now? Okay, there we go. I won't start from the beginning then. All right. Those of us in the legislature who follow and care about housing issues are very aware of the serious shortage of quality and affordable housing, particularly for low-income individuals. And we are desperately searching ways of meeting our constituents' housing needs and maintaining the capacity of critical affordable housing in the state of California. I am particularly conscious of the special needs facing vulnerable populations such as the homeless, foster youth, those afflicted with mental illness, and single mothers with children. As chair of the Senate Transportation and Housing Committee, my staff and I will be evaluating each housing bill legislation through the lens of how it helps low and very low income population as well as the homeless. It is my belief that those of us in state government have a moral obligation to do more to help these populations. I look forward to hearing from each one of you today and continue working together to address these issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Bell. And at this time, I'd like to invite other members of the committee to give opening remarks, if so desired. Senator Bates.
Thank you, Assembly Member. Yeah, I heard that one. So I can get it over here. Assembly Member Chow and Senator Bell, thank you for holding this hearing this morning and providing all of us an opportunity to hear from some of our state's experts on housing issues that we will address during this legislative session. I'm honored to serve with Chairman Bell and my Senate colleagues on the Senate Transportation and Housing Committee, and I look forward to a positive, productive, and bipartisan working relationship as we address our state's transportation and housing challenges. However, this morning I would like to take an opportunity to share with you an issue that is so important to me and to initiate an open and respectful conversation about the challenges that we face as we work together to ensure both housing affordability and housing safety for our residents. On January 20th, there was a terrible fire at a condominium complex in my district in the city of San Juan Capistrano that injured scores and tragically took the lives of a mother and her 2 young sons. As we confront the challenges associated with our housing issues, I am committed to examining what could potentially be done to help prevent a similar tragedy in the future. According to public reports, 17 people were living in a 4-bedroom unit where the fire took those 3 young lives. The unit was barely over 1,000 square feet. Our local safety officials observed that a living arrangement like this could have been a factor in the tragedy, since every occupant necessarily requires certain possessions, such as clothing and mattresses, and more occupants with more flammable possessions can increase fire risk. Colleagues, the occupancy standards that have been established under state law would allow for 17 people to live in that condominium unit that was barely larger than 1,000 square feet. So I want to thank Chairman Bell for considering my request to, at a future, convene an informational hearing on residential occupancy standards, and I know that's a difficult issue as we look at affordability. But thank you to the committee staff who've been working with my staff to help initiate a dialogue with experts and stakeholders that will be essential to us examining this very significant public safety and housing issue. So I look forward to our future discussions, and thank you for this morning.
Thank you very much, Senator Bates. And are there anyone else who would like to make opening remarks? Seeing none, let's bring up our panelists. Let's start with our first panelist, and she is Claudia Capio, who is the Director of Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD for short. Good morning, Claudia.
Good morning.
And welcome to our panel.
Thank you.
And anytime you're ready, you may begin.
Appreciate the opportunity to be here today and to give you a lot of information in a short time, but hopefully good information, and I welcome questions and comments at any time. During the next few minutes, I'll be taking, is there a way to, sorry, the slide. I'll be taking you on a brisk hike along 4 major elements. First, who are the state housing entities and what we do, at least an overview of that, current context and conditions, why state intervention in the housing market makes sense, and finally, how affordable housing connects to other major state initiatives. We've got a number of housing finance entities in the state. I'm HCD. There is a sister agency at the Agency of Business Consumer Services and Housing, CalHFA, and then there's the 2 state tax credit agencies within the Treasurer's Office. We also are doing work and are deeply connected to other entities with state housing resources, including CalVets, the Strategic Growth Council, and the Department of Healthcare Services. With regard to the housing market context, as Assembly members have alluded to this morning, we are in a crisis. That crisis is not new, but we have devoted significant housing resources in the last 10 to 15 years, and some of those resources are gone now, so we have to rethink what we're going to be doing and how we're going to be responding. Housing demand is increasing and holding steady, but supply, actual production, is not keeping up with demand. We are, particularly within certain market areas, and at the last peak in 2004, we produced about 200,000 units, and we are expecting 2.7 million new households within the next 15 to 20 years. So you can see that if you do the math, we're in a growing crisis. Home ownership rates, as has been mentioned today, are also in historic decline. Part of that is in response to the housing crisis of a few years ago, but also there are other factors that influence affordability and the ability to own a home. As I noted, market demand is strong, particularly in certain areas, and it is a variety of factors are influencing this, including aging population and what we call the echo boom. Their housing needs are changing, and also Gen X and Gen Y, their housing preferences are changing, as well as their ability to pay. We have a higher demand at this point for rental property given the decreasing home ownership rates. We have growing income disparities throughout the state, and there's also shifting geographic preferences, obviously based on economic development and job centers. California renters' incomes are not keeping pace with growing rental rates. There is a statistic recently that was very troubling to me, that over 2 million lower-income California households pay well over 50% of their income for rent. That means that other needs are not being met. So what is the state response and why state response? We believe that as housing entities in the state, we have substantial contributions and connections to a variety of other major state challenges and initiatives, including education, transportation, health care, and economic development. So housing connects to all these other initiatives. We have a significant problem with the housing shortage, as I mentioned, and these are just some of the problems that are influenced or made worse by a housing shortage. We also have, in this time and place right now, California 2015, a big shift in how resources have been applied for housing in the last 10 to 15 years. We've been relying on bond money through Prop 1C, Prop 46, and then the Mental Health Services Act, and those resources are waning. Although we have gotten other resources, they're nowhere near what the peak was a couple of years ago. The good part of that is it's giving us a chance to step back and seeing what will be effective, what could be effective. Obviously, the negative side of that is that there's not nearly enough resources to go around to meet the need. So we also at HCD have an administrative and regulatory role in housing, and I'll just run through those quickly. We have a housing planning function, health and safety through our building code and standards division, and then obviously financing. With our other sister agencies, we have these 4 common objectives. Obviously, the production and building new affordable housing and preserving affordable housing supply is really important. Catalyzing or taking advantage of private investment, incentivizing good development, sustainable development that makes sense in terms of proximity to transportation and at a density that's sustainable, and obviously connecting up people who really need support services and other help to those assistance, to that assistance. We have a statewide housing plan underway right now. By state statute, we're required to do this every few years, and we're in the midst of this. It should be released sometime later this year, but we've been convening a broad set of stakeholders and other groups. We've been working in primary connection with our sister agencies to come up with a plan that provides a roadmap for the future and makes tangible and practical sense as we move forward. We also have a connection to state housing planning law. As many of you may know, we are the agency that administers and reviews housing elements that are a part of each jurisdiction's general plan for growth and development. That element basically identifies housing needs in a community, addresses barriers and constraints to development, and also makes sure that there are some practical and key approaches to meeting those needs over a specific period of time. We have a couple of different ways that we provide financial assistance at HCD. These are the 3 keys. We provide operating subsidies that produce an ongoing financial assistance in an affordable housing development. We provide capital in order to make affordable housing more practical to develop at the beginning with capital resources for construction, and we have rental subsidies that we administer in order to keep families in that housing over time. As I mentioned, we are also we're also in charge of building codes, housing building codes and standards in the state, and we basically have a health and safety aspect to these, as has been mentioned this morning, as well as a growing influence and role in making sure that those standards are green, they're sustainable, and they save energy and greenhouse gases, reduce greenhouse gases. We have, excuse me. Yeah. We also have a big role in mobile homes in terms of the physical improvements to parks, inspections of mobile homes, and making sure that they meet certain safety standards. Within the state, we have over 400,000 mobile homes, and that represents a big supply of basically affordable housing. So this function is very important. We have a variety of community development tools as well that we have. Affordable housing and sustainable communities is a new program this year, and we're working in conjunction with CalSTA, with the Strategic Growth Council, and with EPA in making sure that part of the cap and trade proceeds go to affordable housing and transit-oriented development. We also have the Veterans Assistance program through Prop 41, the infrastructure program through Prop 1C, which basically gave grants so that infill housing could be more viable and obviously serve an affordable population. And we have a mobile home improvement program for the parks, making sure that capital investment is made in parks to make sure that they remain viable and safe for the residents. As I mentioned, we have the Veterans Housing and Homelessness Program through Prop 41, the first $75 million. The notice of funding availability is about to go out. And we also have the Multiple Family Housing Program, which is a number of years old. And last year, through your good work of the legislature, we were able to get an additional allocation of $100 million. This assists developers with loans that are at an affordable rate to provide new housing production. A part of the MHP program, or multiple family housing program, is also supportive housing, making sure that certain segments of the population are not only housed safely, but there's connections to key social services and other programs that can improve their lives. We've also been brought in with the drought. We had a drought rental assistance program last year as part of the governor's office efforts to respond to the drought, and we were able to cobble together some rental assistance money for people who were affected in certain areas of California with their jobs and negatively impacted by the drought. We have a key component of our program serving the rural populations of California. We have the Joe Cerner Jr. Farm Worker Housing Program that's been very well regarded, although is in need of more funding. And then the Office of Migrant Services, we run a variety of shelters and units throughout the state to provide needed migrant worker housing. We are one of the key benefactors of federal programs in the state, and we run a variety of federal programs: the Community Development Block Grant Program, which assists housing and economic development; the Home Investment Partnership, which again provides loans and grants for affordable housing; and then the Federal Emergency Shelter Grant Program for homelessness assistance. We have a small component of our programs assisting home buyers in the state with down payment assistance, and also grants to local jurisdictions for deferral of loans in order to make home ownership more affordable. We have a number of current initiatives underway, and including a homelessness policy academy that was in conjunction with some federal assistance, where we learned what would be reworking some of the homelessness assistance in the state to provide better assistance more efficiently and get that assistance out more rapidly. We have completed an affordable housing study in October with our sister agencies at CalHFA and the 2 tax credit agencies, which went into what are the major cost components of producing affordable housing, and what are the best practices of making sure that we're spending that money in as efficient and economical a manner as possible. And then we are also a part, through the Governor's Office, of the National Disaster Resilience Competition. We are in application for that, making sure that any response and rebuilding of a community after a disaster is done so in the most sustainable way possible. On the horizon, I've mentioned a lot of these so far, but these all are underway. We're, even without as much money as we've had in the past, although I'd love some more, we are well underway with some major initiatives which we believe will serve the citizens of the state who need it the most in a big and better way. And I will be glad to either hold questions or respond to them at this point.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation, Ms. Capiel. Instead of holding the questions, perhaps we could open it up for questions for now, and then we could, if there's any follow-up questions later on, you could stay also for those
Sure.
as well. So at this time, are there any questions from committees? Senator Roth.
Good morning.
But I'll try to talk. I know it's on. I'll try to speak loudly. You mentioned on, I think, your first slide referenced the Calvet Home Loan Program. And I'm somewhat concerned about the effectiveness of that program. I saw some statistics recently that indicated, and I don't know the time period, but I can get that during a period where U.S. VA issued about 22,000 home loans, Calvet issued about 280, give or take. Has your department, or have you, in conjunction with Calvet, taken a look at the existing Calvet Home Loan Program, given the number of veterans we have in the state, the number that will become veterans in the state, and the veterans homeless population? Have you taken a look at the Calvet Home Loan Program to see what can be done if there in fact are obstacles to preventing the Calvet Department from issuing home loans to veterans, and whether our program that obviously was designed many years, if not decades ago, is suitable for the 21st century? Is that a fair question?
Absolutely. Any question's fair. That's the spot I hold. So I will divide that up into a couple of responses. First, the CalVets programs historically have served veterans who want to buy single-family loans or farms, and so their system is based upon that model. And in 2013-14, you all basically repurposed $600 million of an existing bond in order to serve homelessness and multiple family housing or transitional and supportive housing for vets. So we have been underway with that program for over a year, and as I mentioned, the first $75 million of that will be out within the next couple of weeks for a notice of funding availability. We have met with CalVets regarding their home loan programs, and I believe that CalHFA may be more attuned to mortgage products and other approaches that could serve vets who want to buy their homes in a better way. So HCD has not been a direct part of those conversations, but we certainly would be willing to participate in any effort like that, and I'll make sure that we make a connection to CalVets in that manner. There's a new secretary, so we've met her last week and been discussing a joint initiative, so I will follow up on that.
Well, let me make one observation, Mr. Chair, before I ask my follow-up question. What I'm concerned about is last year, when we took a look at repurposing the money, what we didn't ask was why did we have, over $1.1 or $1.2 billion in either issued or authorized but unissued money sitting in a home loan fund in a state that had the highest homeless veterans population in the nation at a time when we were downsizing the Department of Defense and military members were leaving military installations in droves. So just an observation, and I'm happy to follow up with you on that and see if
and I would be as well, along with the finance folks at CalHFA, and to make sure that we could create tools that are leveraged and perhaps serve vets better in that way.
Now let me ask one follow-up having to do with the Prop 41 money, and I understand that we've repurposed this and regulations are forthcoming, and we're going to get money out to developers to develop transitional and supportive housing for veterans. Has there been any thought given to how we're going to fund the supportive services piece of this once we have the housing in place? Because I assume the bond money doesn't go for O&M funds for supportive services, and that money has to come from some other pot. Is that correct?
That's correct, and I will note to you that that's one of the balancing acts that we've wrestled with in designing the program because of the mandated income level that we had to reach and the homelessness population, the homelessness vets population. What we've done in this first round of funding, which is coming out, is basically we have increased the amount of the loan that you're able to obtain, and therefore you can devote other resources that may be more flexible to provide the supportive services. But I will note to you that this is an ongoing problem, and I would like to address it in a more sustainable way. But that is how we've chosen to actually come down on it for this first round.
And is there documentation, are there reports that deal with some of these issues that folks like me could read?
Yeah, I certainly would share with you what we have produced in order to make sense of it. I would be glad to set up a meeting and also invite CalVets as well to make sure that you understand what that means with regard to the use of the bond money.
Perfectly, because I don't want to see, I'd hate to see us have facilities that are built but no supportive services available for the transitioning veterans in the facilities.
Right. This has been a big priority for us to make sure that in the production of that housing, obviously, the most important thing is to connect the vets with the services they need, even the services they're entitled to and they may not know about, in order to create the framework for improving their lives.
Thank you, Madam Director. Thank you,
bet.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Assemblymember Chu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Madam Director, for your brisk hike around housing and housing programs at HCD. I was very interested in serving on this committee because I share the perspective I think many of us in this room have that California is in the midst of an intense affordable housing crisis, and that in so many parts of the state, there are millions of Californians that are struggling to make ends meet, to be able to afford some of the most expensive housing in the country. And you had a slide around declining state resources that showed that we had a height in 2006 after Prop 1C of about $2.8 billion being invested in that year around housing, dropping to this year, where, if my math is correct, the $65 million that we are allotting represents about 0.2% of what we had allotted in 2006 around this topic. High-level question for you. I know it's probably a little more complicated than my question, but what level of resources do you think we need to be investing as a state to start to reverse the affordable housing crisis?
Well, the short answer is as much as you can give me, right? I think that is a really big dilemma because we have huge needs. So what we've been really focused on is what are the most effective ways for the state to intervene. The housing market is complex and there are many needs. So how do we focus those needs on the target populations and other programs that have proven most effective? I know it's more than we've got now, but I also want to spend time throughout the next couple of months when we're developing the strategic priorities and recommended policies of the state housing plan, is where is that sweet spot of where the state can be most effective in intervention. Part of it is production. And with Prop C and Prop 1C and Prop 46, we were in this big production mode. But part of that is leveraging private capital, is making sure that we use the tax credits and other funding sources to the best of our ability in creating those programs that don't fall over each other but produce the most benefit for Californians. It's a big set of dilemmas, and I would welcome your participation in any discussion if you got some ideas.
And I certainly appreciate the challenges of trying to grapple with this, and I think we all would agree that the solutions need to be multifaceted. We need to think about tax credits. We need to think about more permanent funding sources, and certainly with Prop 1C funding drying out, certainly with the end of redevelopment, we need to do more. I think from my perspective, everyone talks about the crisis, but it's been hard to really pin down in each of these areas what would we have to do to really turn things around, and those are some of the answers that I'm certainly interested in exploring.
I think one of the keys for me, at least in the last 4 years doing this job or a related job, is that if you had a consistent source of funding, because we've been in this sort of ebb and flow of the bonds. If you had a consistent source of funding, we could make decisions differently for the longer view, which may in fact look at investment differently. So we've looked at it with regard to investment. And on the horizon, as you may know, is the National Housing Trust Fund. Still a little bit of a dream, but if that came to pass, that would be one consistent source. And we may cobble together other sources that make sense in order to provide a more consistent basis for funding affordable housing and its related programs.
And I think one of the challenges when you said at the beginning that your answer is as much as we can give you, obviously you're being somewhat facetious, but I think everyone recognizes you do need significantly more money. And if we could articulate that to some degree, and maybe it's not $10 billion, maybe it's a few $billion, maybe it's a significant increase in a tax credit, a significant increase in private housing production. Being able to articulate that with some concreteness, I think, would be helpful, and that's definitely what I'm looking for.
Right, and I think there are trade-offs in terms of the tools that you focus on. So 1C and 46, straight production, right? Tax credits, which are an amazingly powerful tool, depending on how they're organized, the rules and regulations behind them, it's having all those tools work together and getting as much leverage as we can with other sources of funding, particularly the private capital markets. That's a big piece of it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Senator Bell, and then followed by Assemblymember Kevin Mullen.